Good evening, everyone. We are back. We had a week off because we thought football was coming home. It did not at the weekend, so apologies if anybody's still a little bit sore about that. I'm just getting over it. Ready for the World Cup. Anyway, welcome to the live talks. We have the lovely Grace Shayler on with me tonight, who is a horse behaviourist, horse psychologist, and one of my little heroes that I've followed on Instagram for so long now, and kind of led the way with me and my youngsters. So welcome, Grace. How are you?
Thank you for having me, and I'm great, thank you. Like, I live for the summer, so this is my favourite time of year.
It is definitely this week. We're going into like 28 degrees. You've been loving it.
Yes, I've actually got my arms out, which you can tell it must be warm if I've got my arms out.
It is. It's really nice. So no, thank you very much for joining us. Just want to give a little bit of intro as to who you are. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, so like I said, I'm Grace, and I would call myself an ethical horse trainer. So as for that, I try to tailor all of my horse training to how horses learn. So that's what I say I would specialise in, is that I've studied how horses learn, how their brain works, and how then we can communicate what we're trying to do with them better. And this all started from because of my job. So I am a training supervisor at Blue Cross, so an animal charity, and we had some of the most messed up horses came in about 6 or 7 years ago, which set me on this journey because I had to lead a team to be able to train these horses, and actually I ran out of skills. So I went on a journey of discovery to how we could better communicate and how we could understand them better. And in the whole process, I've changed everything up, what I do about all of my horses, how I start horses and how I introduce things. And so that's pretty much what shaped me to be more of an ethical horse trainer. It's just all basically horse-led, to be able to have like happy and experiences for horses, and then we can make it as ethical as we can. You know, if we're going to ride them, if we're going to, you know, we're a person riding a wild animal, if we can make it as ethical as we can and they almost have choices, that's where I come from with my training.
Excellent. Have you always wanted to work with horses then? Is this something that you've from being young, or no?
Well, famously, no. Until the age of 9, I was terrified of horses. Unbelievably. Yeah, I was into gymnastics. I was selected for the under 10 teams and stuff like that. So like really that was what I wanted to do. And then my mum made me give up. My sister had a horse, so they just bought me a horse and was like, right, this is what you're into now. so that's what happened. And then I just went to uni and I did equine sports science, and I wanted to actually train people. Fundamentally, I wanted to do like so I'm actually a qualified personal trainer as well, so I wanted to mostly train people. But then when I finished that, I finished at there, and then we had a credit crunch, so then nobody wanted a personal trainer. That's the first thing you cut out of your expenditure. So then I got a weekend job at Blue Cross, and then my life changed all the way from there. I started just as a weekender, and then I was a rider for them, and then like I said, then I became my role, and I had to literally change everything. So necessarily I didn't want to work with horses, but now I can't really imagine my life without it. So yes and no.
So you were saying that you're getting into the ethical horse training. So if we say ethical horse training, what does that actually mean then?
Well, like I said, fundamentally it's about being as methodical and as clear with what you're asking of the horse. So there's clear, for the better word, consequences. So when I do this, this means this, and when I do that, that means that. So that we're being as clear as we can and always using the minimum amount of pressure as possible. So could I do this in an even lighter way? Could I do it with a voice cue? Could I do it in any other way? So always using the minimum force you can to be as ethical as we can, so the horses don't necessarily have to endure higher pressures or whip taps if they don't need it. So that would be what I would describe as ethical, so just being as clear and concise with horses and using as little pressure as possible to still get your outcome there.
So it's kind of, because a lot of it, I was talking about it on the stories this week, is that you get a lot of horse training where it's a fear-based behaviour. So I've been subjected to it in the cross-country ring where they're like, well, just whip it I know, just like whip it. It needs to. I hate the fact it needs to learn. I get a lot. So this is what kind of brought me to looking at this, because it's a totally different way of thinking, isn't it? It's getting them to kind of make the decisions as I understand it themselves.
Yeah, it's almost giving them that choice. You're giving them the tools to be able to understand it themselves. So then they necessarily want to learn and they want to investigate something, instead of you're trying to do fear. I know on your stories the other day you were talking about lunging. So, and I also talked about lunging not that long ago.
I think about lunging, but go on, tell me your view on lunging.
Not necessarily about lunging, but because often what happens is when someone's lunging, they use a lot of force to make the horse go forwards, but what you can actually do is get them into flight and then in adrenaline mode. And whoever learns well when you're in high flight and adrenaline mode is never your thing. And it's the same like well, I went out and saw someone the other day who was having a problem and they had gone to punishment, and I don't necessarily condone punishment. And they would shout and hit the horse. And I use the example, who's ever calmed down from being shouted and hit? No one. Why would you expect your horse to do the same? So it's about how we can introduce horses to a way that they understand what we're asking. So if you're introducing them to water, for example, horses are scared to go in water, because why would you do that? You're safe on land, and then I'm going to make you go into something that is unknown at the bottom that you could sink in. You know, they're a prey animal, they need to stay alive, and we ride them and we want them to do water, we want them to get out ditches, we want to do all these things. So it's explaining it in a way that they understand. We give them the time, and then once they've learned that that's okay and they can start to generalize, I won't go too far down that line, then we can then you can really start to have really confident horses that then see new things and like, oh, new things mean nice things happen. So then you have curious things. So I know you're having great success with Mo at the moment, when you're like, because you've done some groundwork, and now he's like, oh, actually, new things are actually quite nice. Instead of learning just based on fear of, I am going to make you do this, or I am going to force you to do that, you're using fear to make the behavior happen, which does work in some horses' cases, but I can tell in a lot of horses' cases it doesn't work, and you then end up with quite a fearful horse. Either you can't make do it, so fear stops working, or you end up with a horse that does do it, but purely out of fear. I know that probably everyone here loves their horses and they would like their horses to love them. So as much as we can, we need to install that love into the relationship bank account, instead of constantly making those withdrawals if we're going all on fear.
Do you think they get to a certain point with the kind of fear where they will stop and say, and then it's harder then to unpick that problem?
Yeah, they definitely can. You can get to the point where they it can be called toxic shutdown, where they can get to the point where they literally will stop responding. So they either will not move, or they literally pretend that you're not there. Or I have known horses in the past, when we've gone to a welfare lift, they'll just lie down and you won't ever be able to get them back up again, because they've literally got to the point where they cannot take the level of stress anymore. I'm not saying anyone like that, and it's very, very rare that a horse would get to the point where they would stop responding at all. But that is something that does sadly happen in horses. So I would always try to involve them in the decision-making process. Like we all like to be involved if there's big changes happening. You know, if you're involved, you're on board with it more than if it's just forced upon you, you know, then that would be how I'd go about it. But yeah, they can definitely shut down and not respond anymore, which is personally I think quite sad.
It is, yeah, definitely, because like you say, we all spend so much time and money on our horses. We want them to kind of enjoy the experience, and this is why I think this kind of learning opens up a whole different avenue. And I must admit, some people we've got a bigger livery yard, have kind of gone, what is with the groundwork patterns and things that you can do, what is she doing, and I've had, what you're trying to achieve? But
I've had that.
It's like, what are you trying to do at that point? But when we then ask, because I've started with Mo just simply because he's a blank canvas.
Yeah.
Reg has got issues that will need tackling bigger, yeah, further down the line. But yeah, so then they become more acceptable to when you ask, oh, will you walk up these cross country steps? He's like, oh yeah, oh okay, well we'll have a go at that. And I know you've seen that with, because you've got an extra racehorse as well, haven't you? With Marlene.
4-year-old Marlene. Yes, she's a very slow racehorse, which is why she lives with me and she's only 4. Yeah, when she came to me, she's always been such a lovely, sweet horse, but she was really quite not responsive to people at all, and she was quite introverted. And I later obviously found out she had ulcers, so we have obviously treated all that. And she wouldn't investigate anything, like, so she would go near something and a little bit like you just said, like she'd just stand there and go, I'm accepting it and I don't really like it. So throughout the whole winter, all I've done is groundwork with her, and now she's a little confident thing. Like, I filmed a reel the other day for a company I work with, and you see, she was like wrecking the joint. She was like turning the sun lounger over. She just collapsed the table. And we've gone from a horse that wouldn't go into spaces, or she wouldn't, and just being like, oh, okay, I'll do it, but I don't really want to a horse that's like, I'm going to investigate everything. Like, it's just the difference of when you've put that time in. So when eventually we get to eventing, she already has like, oh, new things actually mean nice things. She's going to give it more of a go than if I'd just force her to. And I cracked on when she was 3 when I got her. I think we'd be still in quite a scenario where she didn't necessarily want to investigate anything new, and I'd be forcing her to do stuff.
Yeah, the outtakes were amazing.
So funny. I've never had so many outtakes, and there's still way more. It was just so funny. But think, yeah, just how different she was to when I first got her. And like, I know most racehorses are not trained to stand still at a mounting block. Now I can stand her on the other side of the arena and I can say the word here, and she walks over and she swings her quarters to me and I can get on, from a horse that I couldn't mount and have had to mount at trot. Like, so it's just taking those key steps. And now I've got a horse that chooses to be mounted instead of having to run away when someone's getting on me. And now I can do that anywhere and everywhere. Like, I can do out on hacks, like we go on a hack, and like I can unload her somewhere and then ask her to come here, and she comes over. So she's still choosing to do that even in an unknown place, which is just, it's taking a bit of time, but that is just, it's massive for me that she's almost choosing to take part in the training now.
Yeah, she wants to. She's actually thinking, oh, okay, this is a fun bit. So Grace, what made you interested then in this type of training?
You said mostly, I'm not gonna lie, it was my work. So I work with abused horses mostly, and quite a lot of backing horses. But like I said, we had, sorry if anyone finds this quite horrible, but it is true. So we had this group of horses that in all, we had about 50, but this first group of 10 where none of us knew what we were doing. And that because these horses were being run for a crush, they'd been beaten, they were all emaciated. This man used to put them, one mare, in a barn, and he would put 5 stands there and they'd fight. And some of them had face paralysis where they'd been hitting over the head with crowbars and stuff. These were severely abused horses. And to the point where we arrive and you enter a 5-acre field and they're jumping out of the field. Like, that's how terrified these horses were. So no traditional methods were going to ever get close to these horses. So that was where I started to go on this journey, because I was like, I cannot put down, well, it was 10 in this case, but I cannot put down these 10 horses knowing these are healthy horses, and humans have done this to them. I couldn't do that on my conscience, because that was the only option we had at that time. So I was like, right, those horses are just staying in the field. No, we're just going to feed and water them. And that's what we're going to do for the time being until we've learned some skills. So that was what I decided. Luckily, I was the boss, so it was easy for me to say that. So that's when I went on this journey of discovery, that I was like, right, we cannot do, traditional is not going to work for me. What can I do? So I then learned loads of clicker training and positive reinforcement, which made the most biggest difference. And I still use it now. I still use it with my own horses. I'm a combined reinforcer, so I do still use pressure and release, but I do obviously use food and scratches as well, which was the biggest thing. So once you've done that level of horse that was so terrified to the point where they're rehomeable to people that don't necessarily have as much information as, you know, people that I work with now. To that point, you feel like, okay, I can communicate with most horses out there. So that was where my drive was, because I just felt so sorry for these horses that, like I said, have been put in this position by humans. I had to go out of my way. It was my duty, I thought, to fix them. So now what I actually now specialise in is severe aggression. Yay for me. and backing horses is what my two area of expertise is that I mostly teach in. But because actually I find the same in severe aggressive cases, because horses aren't naturally aggressive. They can be aggressive to other horses if they have lack of space or lack of food or lack of water, or maybe it's not the right companion for them. But the horses aren't truly aggressive. If you watch horses in a natural environment, they either don't interact at all, they tear each other wide berths, or they might fight over mares, but they're fighting over resource. They don't necessarily fight in general. But if they're aggressive to a human, it's always man-made. So it's either that we haven't given the right environment. So are we stabling them all the time? Have we not given them the right opportunities for them to interact with other horses? Are we training them in the way they don't even understand what we're on about? So that's where I feel like I'm needed. So that's often why I deal with horses with severe aggression, because actually that's where I feel like I could make a massive difference. And then I love training young horses, which is good for me. Because for me, young horses, you can set them up for the rest of their lives. If you can start them nicely and you can start them in a way that they understand, A always means A and B always means B, then you'll have really confident horses that can go on to have many different careers or just be happy, you know, companions. And that is ideal for me. So that was sort of what set me on this journey. Obviously, I own my own horses. So Boyce, I homebred him. He was backed very, very traditionally. And I started on this journey when he was just after 4. And since then, obviously, he was backed, but I've retrained to how I would more train now. And now that horse does demos. He does international demos all around, and because of the way he is trained. So I can put nervous people on him, I can put anyone on him. And like the way I trained in a way, it's so funny. I was doing a demonstration with what is my guru. He lives in Australia. He came over and we were doing the VHS conference a few years ago. And he was like, right, Grace, I want you to get your super slow trot. So I was just like, because I was just literally doing exactly what he said. So I was like, oh, 6 8 trot. And he was like, right, Grace, can you come out of that and do longer? And then straight after ask shorter. And literally, I'm stood there doing passage. I've never ridden passage. He'd never been trained passage. But because I trained the things fundamentally and I trained everything in such a methodical way, was just like, oh, this is what you mean. And I was like, I don't know how I've created that. Cheers. So like, if you can train it methodically and every cue is different, and they understand what that is, you can put things together easily, and you've now got a really well-rounded horse that, to be fair, I spent years training in the fundamentals, and then I can suddenly do movements that you wouldn't have thought you could because I'd spent so long at the basic level. So it literally translates across all of them for me, of all horses. But yeah, so that was a very long-winded question. You asked how I got into this, and I've gone way off.
Fascinating. I have to say, did the horses, the 10 horses that you started with, did they become kind of rehomed? And
they were rehomed. Only one went on to be ridden. I was surprised that even one went on to be ridden, because like I said, we were terrified. But all of them went on to be rehomed. So that is absolute dedication from my team, and obviously me as well, but my team so I don't get to do as much hands-on as I do anymore as I used to, sadly. So now I'm more training people how to train horses, which is also good, because, you know, that helps more horses, more people I train, the more people I can go up, you know, more horses I can help. But yeah, so it's a massive dedication, and I'm not going to say it was a quick process, because we were learning with the most terrified horses. So it was about 2 years to get them to the point where they were rehomeable, but all of them are now happy and loved in a home, which is just such an achievement for me and my team. Like, it was just amazing, absolutely amazing. One of my greatest achievements in life.
So you must get such good job satisfaction from seeing that them horses come in that people are kind of like, we need to put them down because there's nothing we can do to them, to now living their lives out doing you
I
know,
know,
whatever.
having a lovely time. Like some of them have gone on to agility, like horses that were terrified of life and now going off and doing agility courses. You know, it was just amazing. And, you know, I'm very, very lucky. So you know, at our centre, we probably train 200 to 300 horses a year. So I get to see a lot of horses come through. And the change in horses is just so rewarding. And to then see how they get on in their homes, oh, it's just so heartwarming. Like, makes my job just even more ideal. And then occasionally I get to go out if they're having small problems out in homes, and I can then give them more advice, and then they have an even better time. So for me, I've got like my dream job.
It sounds it. I must admit, I've kind of. Would you say that every horse is trainable? Then you wouldn't. Is there ever one that you think has come in and gone, there's nothing that we can do for that one?
I've never had one where I don't think me and my team would train it. I would be lying if I said that every horse I've trained I think is rehomable for the general public. Yeah. Yes, I have had a couple which I've had to deem not sadly rehomable, or can only be rehomed to a team member because their level was so complex. Like one off the top of my head was a covering stallion, and sadly he'd never been socialized and he'd been kept in a stable all of his life. And he came to us and it almost blew his brain, and he couldn't see horses without having to jump out, and in the process he would attack people on the way. So although we could get him to a really good point, you still have to go, is it going to be safe? Because that's also a priority of mine. Are people going to be safe? So it's very, very rare that I would ever say that a horse isn't rehomable, because I truly, truly believe if you can understand them and you can communicate in a way that they understand, we can turn them around. It was just, you know, it's just very few cases where I have to go, actually, can I safely put this out into the community and know that potentially someone that doesn't know as much as we know now be able to handle them. Sadly, like I said, it's very rare, but I'm very confident by the horses that we rehome are very rounded horses.
Well grounded.
Well grounded.
One of the very first posts I remember seeing of yours that actually kind of stuck in my head is there's no such thing as a naughty horse.
Things a naughty horse.
I love this kind of, because you hear it so much in that my horse is naughty, and I've still had debates with maybe older riders.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm old in myself, but older than me riders that kind of says, oh yeah, I've known one that that it was naughty. Now explain, there's no such thing as a naughty horse.
There's no such thing as a naughty horse. This is a massive thing that I spent a long time researching, because, you know, we've all grown up that horses were naughty. I'm just putting my hands up, you know, I used to say that back in the day, obviously. But so horses' brains are really, really different to human brains. So it's easy to talk about human brains to begin with. So we have many different regions, but the main region which makes us different to most animals is our prefrontal cortex, which is the front, which is where we can replay things, and you've got a really good memory, and we can also twist things in our minds. You know, when you recall things, and if you said the same as someone else, like you would both recall it slightly differently, even though you both are at the same scenario. So we learn things slightly differently, and like I said, we can twist it. The horses have a really undeveloped prefrontal cortex. So where we do all of our planning and all of our reviewing, remember, that is underdeveloped. So the level of planning that you need to be naughty, to purposely go out of your way to not do something that your owner might want you to do, they just don't have that level of brain structure. So horses learn mostly by consequences. So bush rustles, run away, because that could be a tiger jumping out. You know, that's how they stay alive, and that's how they stayed alive. So they learn from consequences. So the same as, you know, if you're trotting along the arena, this is the biggest difference though. So we replay in video. So if I told you to go like replay a cross country course, you can replay that in your video. Horses can't recall that in video form. What they actually do is they can recall pictures, but only when they see something. So say you're trotting along the arena and you just think, why are they spooking at those poles? They're just the poles. But actually, you don't know that someone's moved those poles, and they're replaying in their brain going, they weren't there last time. They were slightly further back. They were 2 inches further back, because my visual picture is telling me they were different. So although they might not be scared of those poles, but they've clocked that it's different. And like sometimes you think, well, they're fine on the left rein, and you take them around on the right rein, and you're like, but you've just literally seen these, but they haven't learnt it from the right eye. So it's just so different. Their level of brain is so different. I'm definitely not here telling you horses are stupid. Absolutely not. They're just a different type of learning. So yeah, where we think about that level of planning, because horses are designed to live, well, evolved to live on open grasslands, and grass was everywhere. They never needed that level of planning, so they never had to develop the prefrontal cortex like we did. We're hunter-gatherers, and you know, we've developed that even more, but we're hunter-gatherers. We had to plan to make a meal and what we're going to eat as our next meal. Horses never had to do that. It was everywhere. All they had to do was survive and outrun predators, which is what they're still hardwired to do, because they haven't had a huge amount of evolution over the last 10,000 years, but we've domesticated them over the last 5,000. So they're still very similar to their wild ancestors. And then we ride them. so the level of planning you need to be naughty, they just don't have. And a massive thing that I will delve into a little bit, sorry guys if you're a bit bored, is about the idea of generalization. So I can, you know, so I use children as an example. So if I get pulled out a dining chair, what you can see because I've got my blur on, a dining chair, and then I pulled out an armchair, and then I pulled out a deck chair, and then if I pulled out like a sofa or something, the child would probably still be able to tell me chair, because they've gone, okay, that's something you sit on, that's something you sit on, that's something you sit on, that's probably something else you sit on, it's probably a chair. Horse won't be able to tell me chair, because horses have to learn. Remember, that visual picture has to look the same. So using it as an horse example, so if, let's say water, say you've got a water jump at home, and every day you go through this water, and every day you're like, well, it does water. You get to competition, it doesn't do water. You're like, I go through water every day. But they haven't learned that all waters are the same question. So they need to have a minimum of 5 to 7, so that's minimum, positive experiences with that type of question for them to start to learn to generalize that is a water question, and the water question is always the same.
That's fascinating. Just because I've got that problem. So with Reg, I always say 50-50 at the minute, because we've only done, that's what I'm looking at my numbers.
Glory wall.
But I've done about 9, and probably 3 or 4 of them have had water. He still will he go through water, will he not? It's not a given that he's confident. So that explains why.
So he hasn't quite learned that all water questions are the same, and all water questions are positive. Because it's easier for them to remember fear, because they're hardwired to remember fear. Fear keeps me alive. So that's why. But he needs to learn that water actually means something positive. He needs to have at least 5 to 7 positive experiences for him to start to go, oh, this is a water question and it's okay. So that's why you might find that I take ages before I get to my first event, because I'm taking Marlene to every water and loads of ditches and loads of everything for her to go, okay, these are all fine. And I'm doing it in a non-pressured environment. So I'm not, you know, me as my personal me isn't going, well, come on, we want to complete. You know, I can do it in a very slow, methodical way. And then but you can start to then, okay, yeah, water is always the same. So like boys, unbelievably, so that horse has gone double clear for, I can't tell you how many last events, not that it's currently eventing because it's, you know, that's another story. Anyway, you can go double clear, but I can tell you the first 3 events we went to, bearing in mind I didn't know everything I know now, we had a problem. We had a problem at pretty much everything. He would go so slowly. Although he went over everything, he was terrified of every single jump. He would we'd end up with 18 time faults because everything he had to process was so slowly. Everything was in collected canter or trotting, and it was like a state of panic. Although he answered questions, because I hadn't actually generalised cross-country jumps. I hadn't generalised anything enough to him. And we had a problem with our first ever water, because to be fair to him, I think I'd only taken about 2 waters back then, and I was like, right, let's do a hunter trial. I'm sure it'll be fine. But I did so much work. Every single time he went into a water jump or water, I would give him a treat. And now he's like, oh, water, yeah, I'm going to run into the water because I might get a treat. I've weaned him off the treats now, guys. I don't have to do that when I've landed in a jump. But he's now like, oh, something happens. Something nice happens every time I go in the water. So I'm in that process with Marlene. She doesn't have a great association with water, so I'm working on changing how she feels about that. But like, to be able to change that round, so now he's like, yeah, I love water, and he's generalised that water is actually something quite nice, and that's where I can produce double clears, because I've spent such a long time with him, teaching him that all these different things are all nice, and they all mean something nice is going to happen. Then that's when you can, you know. Like I said, we should have been novice and we were ending for intermediate this year, but you know, we just haven't happened because he's injured. But you know, I would be very confident that we'd be able to get around, because he's just learned to generalize, because I spent so long doing that stage.
That's fascinating, because people mean miles on the clock. And that's a similar thing, isn't it? It's kind of like, you know, we had a major issue going from last year where we finished quite a small height, but he was really confident. Then we had a massive time off. And then I just went straight back out and thought, I remember it all. It'll be exactly the same. No, it wasn't, funnily enough. And we didn't even get through the show jumping. And that's that kind of immaturity. And it's just not me just being a little bit, come on, we need to do it. You need to take that time. And he's only 7. So, you know, just every day's a learning day, isn't it?
It's a learning day. And the more learning days that he perceives are positive, the more actually, when you get to, if you spent, like I said, if you built enough in that relationship bank account, then you trust that every single time you ask these questions, I think something nice always happens. You'll then get to a jump and you think, oh Christ, we've never jumped that type of corner before. But because you've spent so long teaching them that all nice things happen when it's new, he'll be like, okay, I'll give this a go. Because that's what I've got to with Boyce, and I'm getting there with Marlene, but it's definitely not proofed yet. Where they learn that doing something new is actually quite fun and quite enjoyable, and you will get there with Reg. I know you will, because you're dedicated to do it, so it will 100% happen. You know, it just takes time. It does
definitely. Like I say, it's been easier with Mo doing the groundwork. He accepts it more. So had
no bad experiences, because like Reg just had a pre-life before he came to you.
Yeah,
but you never know exactly 100% what's happened. So he could have, you know, I'm not saying he has, using water as an example. So he could have had, say he stood on a stone in the water and that bruised his foot. You know, I went in that water and it hurt me. So I now have some type of bad association with water. I go in it and it hurts my feet. Why would I go in water? So you don't know what's happened pre-you. I'm very, very lucky with Boyce. I bred him, so I know exactly what's happened to that horse. Sometimes I just didn't train it, I'm free doing stuff, but I do now. But Marlene, like a little bit with her, I don't 100% know her history, although I don't think she's had a horrendous history. She hasn't had a, you know, as I would in an ideal world, but you know, we don't all live in an ideal world. So there's more, and I know you'll get there. The more you give him positive experiences, the more he will then go, oh, this is a new experience, it'll be fine.
We just need to get him sound at the minute.
Sound first. If you get the trick of keeping them sound, if you let me know with Boyce, that would be ideal.
I don't even know myself at the minute. He's kind of, just self-harmer. I think he is.
Boyce is a self-harmer. We call him the self-harmer.
Yeah, very talented self-harmer. He just injures himself forever. Yeah. That's absolutely fascinating. That will just change the way that I kind of put pressure on him as well, because I can understand how he's thinking a little bit differently.
And sometimes put the pressure off you, because sometimes you're like, well, I've done this before. And actually, when you go, okay, maybe I haven't done enough of those before, and they've all been positive, you think, well, okay, that's fine. So it almost takes the pressure off the person as well. Sometimes the more I learn, sometimes I'm like, well, okay, that's the reason why. Stop giving yourself a hard time. You just need to do something else. Because that's often what I used to do, give myself a little hard time. It's like, why can't you do this?
Yeah, I think we're very self-critical, aren't we? And
oh yeah,
that's what kind of pushes you to be better all the time. Oh, fascinating. So what do you think is the biggest misunderstanding then in horse training?
Well, fundamentally, horses being naughty, I think, is a massive one. And for me, what is often happens is actually signals not being necessarily clear enough for horses. So that X always means X. You know, that has to always mean that. It doesn't sometimes mean that, and sometimes it means that. So, you know, I'll open this can of worms. So like leg. So sometimes you might use legs for go. Sometimes you might use leg for sideways. Sometimes you might lose leg for roundness. Sometimes you might lose leg for shorter. Sometimes if you see the pattern here, sometimes leg means a lot of different things. Sometimes it means longer. Sometimes, so you then have to train those really discriminate cues. So like this type of leg means this. This type of leg means this. This type. So if you can train them to understand this exact thing means this, and it always means this, you will end up with a much more confident horse. It's when sometimes it means this and sometimes it means this. How would they know which one you want? I think that's often what happens in horse training, that people assume they know that when you want one thing and actually you want a different thing, because that's actually more what you've trained, and that's actually what the horse finds more comfortable. So sometimes that's why. And I hate opening that kind of worms because it often makes people go, oh no, maybe I sometimes do that. But
Yeah.
if you just think of it from their point of view, you're literally, if you're communicating with someone that's French and you don't speak French, and the only way that you can say maneuver them around a room, if you say each time you do this it means left, or each time you do this it means, if I do this it means go forward 2 times, and if you do this it means go forward, like you'll then end up with a system where you can navigate them around the room. But if sometimes you're saying go, stop, turn, and it all means exactly the same, and you've not trained that individual on what you mean, then how confused is that person trying to be while you're navigating them around the room?
True. It's black and white, isn't it?
Black and white. For me, it just needs to be black and white, and it just needs to be the same thing always means the same thing.
They're kind of like repetition.
Repetition, absolutely, repetition, and the consequences. So I'll deal with this. The consequences don't always need to be bad. So you've got your positive reinforcement. So that's your do a behaviour, and then this happens after. So I'm going to give you something attractive. So that could be a food, it could be a scratch, it could be anything they find rewarding. Or you use your negative reinforcement, which the majority of us here probably do. So that's you're applying your leg, and then you go to leg. That's the speedway outfit. So sometimes you put your leg on and then you remove your leg when they've done the desired behaviour. So that's removal reinforcement or negative reinforcement. So that's the 2 that I will stick to. And mostly, let's stay with those 2. So for horses, what is training negative reinforcement, which we've just said most of us do, pressure release? It's actually the pressure motivates the behavior, but it's actually what you release for is communicating what the answer was for. So that can be positive or negatively, guys. So, if it's always you squeeze forward and the horse goes into walk, and you take your leg off, brilliant, you've trained it to walk on. But say if you've got a napping behavior, which is fundamentally just a deficit in your go, but say you put your leg on and the horse starts to reverse, and then say you lose your balance and your leg comes off, you've actually trained it to go backwards, because what you've done, it's gone backwards and you've taken your leg off. So it goes, okay, what you actually want me to do is to go backwards. And it's the same as like if you're leading them to the field and say that you ask them to stop and they don't stop because we haven't necessarily trained it as clearly as we would, and say that they then take more pressure and they've gone and actually they run and you lose the lead rope, they've learned that actually to make you go away, I need to take the lead rope. So we've accidentally trained it. So we're training all the time. Even when you don't think you're training all the time. Every interaction with horses, we got training, which is sometimes exhausting. So all those times they're learning if we are aiming to or not. The same as like if you're in the stable and you want them to go over, because say you want to think, and you push their bum and they don't necessarily move over, and then you take it off and it didn't really happen. They've learned to habituate to it, so do nothing when you do that. At worst, they could decide that they'll come into you. So because we haven't actually created the behavior. So the consequence of what makes you go away will train the behavior to be more likely in the future. So that's the same with like clicker training or with food or scratch rewards. So you're going to do a behavior and then I'm going to give you something you want. So let's say we'll go back to my leg example. So you're going to put your leg on, and if they go forward, I'm going to take my leg off. So this is actually using combined reinforcement. Anyway, you're going to take my leg off, and then I'm going to give you a scratch or I'm going to give you a treat. what I've told them is pressure goes away and you get this nice thing. And actually that motivates me even more to do this nice thing. But that you can do that in many different ways. Like I get my bridle out, both of my horses now, because I've trained it, put their head in the bridle, open their mouths, and I flick it over, because they've learned that only through using positive reinforcement. So it's all choice. And if they don't choose to put their head thing, it's not a punishment, but that's what we do. So both of them will get my bridle out and both of them go, I'm going to put my bridle on. But there's no pressure in that. So you can train many different behaviours using either your positive reinforcement, so making a behaviour more likely by giving them something attractive, or removing discomfort, so say leg or leg rein pressure or lead rope pressure or whatever, or your hand pressure if you're moving them over, for example, to make it more likely in the future. But if that doesn't happen, you can accidentally sometimes train that to either not respond or respond necessarily not in the correct way.
That's fascinating. Let's, I know, just literally because I keep thinking, oh, I've got that problem. Napping.
So napping, sorry. I think another can of worms.
You've the problem that Reggie's got. So he was always, when I first got him, he was horrendous at napping, and it took a lot of time and patience to get him out hacking confidently. And I still have to at times say, sorry mates, I've got to go out on my own, just so he still builds that confidence up. Yeah. He's still, the one time when he will still nap is leaving the warm up at an event to go to either the start box or to go into the arena. What's tips for stopping napping?
Well, like I said, fundamentally napping is a deficit in your go response. So i.e. you ask him to go and he said doesn't respond. So always I would sharpen up my go. So I'd get that really quite sharp off my leg. So I'm saying like halt to trot or halt to canter. Like it has to be really sharp off your leg. So when you do that, that's what that means. So like he needs to understand that it's always the forward cue, and that's going to make it go away. So it can't sometimes, I'm not saying that you do that, but I know when I've retrained, sometimes the person's they put their leg on, it's not gone anywhere, and they've taken it off and gone, it doesn't work. Well, actually, in your conversation with me telling it doesn't work, I've just seen you tell the horse, actually, sometimes I do this and sometimes it means nothing because you've taken the pressure off. So I would absolutely work on it being really consistent, that every single time you put your leg on and it's a real go response. So although I'm all about ethical, and I absolutely am an ethical trainer, sometimes I would have to use heavy pressures to really make the behavior happen. So then in the future, I can only ever be light, but they understand what I meant. And that always means that. So obviously napping, it's also a friend thing, because obviously they often don't want to leave horses, and they're herd animals. They want to be with friends. So you need to make yourself more attractive than friends. So if there's anything you can do to make yourself more appealing and to build his trust in you, that whenever he's with you, it's a confident time. We are confident, we are absolutely having a great time, mate, because in that scenario, he's only thinking about the horses, and he's also not doing his go response, because he's going, actually, I'd rather prefer to be over there. Sometimes she won't let me off for this. So that's why it's always a two-pronged thing. So I would always say, once he's done that forward cue, always release the pressure when he's actually gone forward, because if you ask for him to go, so if you ask him to go and then you don't take your leg off, he then was like, well, I did that response and she didn't take the pressure off, so maybe it wasn't that. Maybe try something else in my drop down. Maybe I should try rearing. Maybe that will make the pressure go away. Or maybe I should try going sideways. Maybe that will make the pressure go away. So like they have a little drop down thing that, as an example, the things that they can go to, or it's like behaviours that they could do as in their normal repertoire of behaviours. And if what we can do is we just need to motivate them to make the right response. So like sometimes when you're training a young horse, you might find this with Mo. So you put your leg on, and actually a young horse has no idea what that means. No idea. It could be anything. It could be backwards, it could be turn a circle, it could be just move one leg, it could be whatever it is. But it's our responsibility, if we're using pressure and release, is to go, right, that was your response, good, my pressure goes away. So say he's made a little step forward, which will go back to your napping thing. So he's made a little step forward, you need to take the pressure off, because actually fundamentally that's made you go away. Brilliant. So he's now, say he's stalled again, so you're going to put your leg back on, he's going to go again. right, so then you've got a little repetition that he's like, okay, it always goes away once I've gone forward, because discomfort isn't nice. Discomfort isn't nice for horses. We do it from a pressure release, and we obviously tell them that's the right response by removing it. So you've done that a few times, and he's now learned, okay, it definitely always goes away. It's definitely the forward cue that she wants. Okay, so now you're going to go, right, you've taken a step forward, you release, and now you're going to quickly go again. So you've released for your first pressure, and now you're going to go, okay, now I want another one. So now I want you to go quicker in that. Okay, as soon as you go quicker, release. It's the release, it's the motivate, the pressure motivates, but it's the release what actually trains the behavior. So if we don't release quick enough, and they've got a golden 3-second rule. So under research, they found that horses, so this was done in positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement, so that's adding something and taking away something. After 3 seconds, they can't make an association to what the reward or punishment or anything was. So you need to make sure that you've released quick enough. Like the same with also. So we think we're doing nice. So say we finished our round of show jumps, and then we give them our treat, but that could be a minute, 2 minutes after they finish their round of show jumps. They don't know what that treat was for. They have no consequence, because they can't roll back in that memory, as we discussed, which we chatted about in our prefrontal cortex. They can't roll back and say, oh, it's because I completed that round and I went clear. They have no consequence to that. So we need to be quicker. So once you've gone over your jump, you're going to say, good boy, you're going to give him a little wind scratch, you're going to carry on. You know what I mean? So it has to be quick enough for them to understand, oh, that was the right answer for that. Oh, that was the right answer for that. So that's where it is. So if we're using pressure, so the pressure has to go away within that 3-second rule, which I think that research, it is a decreasing scale, but by 9 seconds, which I know is, quite a long time if you're using punishment or whatever, they have literally zero consequence. Zero to make the behavior more or less likely in the future. I'll say. So obviously when we're training, we either want to make a behavior more likely. So your forward response, your go response, your jump response, whatever you're training at that point in time, or you're going to want to make it less likely. So that's your, let's probably say rearing, napping, all those behaviors that we don't necessarily want. There has to be a consequence within those 3 seconds. If you're going to go with punishment, not that it's something I would do, you would definitely have to be really, really quick on your timing for them to have any consequence to say, that's not what I wanted. So the same with, like, say your horse has run out at a jump and then it's sped off and then you've hit it, it doesn't know what you hit it for. Or if you're hitting it a lot at the base of the jump, sometimes, I'm no expert in actually what's happening in the actual horse brain, because I'm not actually a horse. If you're hitting it a lot at the base of a jump, it can be the association with the jump that makes the pain happen. So we need to also be careful that if you're punishing randomly, so if you're not doing it as a motivator pressure, so if you're not saying, come on, and as soon as you go forward, I'm going to stop the pressure, and you're just doing it as a punishment, go, and like there's no release and there's like no consequence for it, so you're actively punishing the horse, what you can do is you can create a bad association with that jump, and then you find that horses often stop 10 strides out because I'm not going back near there. I went near there and I got hit. It's a consequence for the horse. If you actually think it from their point of view, how we can make things more likely is that you need to be clear on exactly what you wanted.
That's fascinating. Just because on the napping thing, I think me thinking, when you're talking there, I'm thinking, actually, yeah, I will constantly put the pressure on. There's no release. So to try and get him in, even if he's walking forward, because there's the pressure, everybody watching you and everything else. Everybody, obviously, I'm the centre of the universe when I go to any competition. And I just constantly will be nag to try and get him in. So yeah, he doesn't even understand what I want. He's like, I'll just stay with the horses then, Mum, thanks.
Because I've tried going forward and she was still putting the pressure on. So why would I do that? Because that's clearly not what she wanted.
I'm going to try.
It is funny. Like, I'm absolutely putting my hands up and say, I used to be guilty of all these things. So don't think I'm like this saint everybody and like I'm saying everyone's bad. I literally was that person. So, but on this journey of discovery has really opened my eyes on how we can better communicate with horses, which is why I class myself as an ethical horse trainer. I just try to think it from their point of view and how they learn and how I can use the minimum amount of pressure that will still make it ethical, for me to condone riding my horse. I can be as least pressure as possible.
It's fascinating. I am definitely going to try that then. That'll be the next thing I try to see. I'll let you know.
I would say, so get it really, really sharp in the school. I don't know how sharp he is off your leg. So can you immediately, yes, this is often, because it's a deficit in your go. So like his actual go response isn't good enough. So in those scenarios when he's a bit stressed and he wants to go to his mate, that's when you need it the most. But that's often when it works the least, because his motivation is horses. So we need to get it quicker in an area, probably your arena he's really, really comfortable with. Get it really good in there, and then you proof it out hacking, and then you proof it here, and then you proof it there, and then in those scenarios where you really need it, it will be better.
Makes sense, because he's not that's one of the major problems we've had with him. He's not off the leg, shall we say, at all. He gets very backwards. Because people have said, like instructors have said to me, it's backwards thinking, because whatever that means, but
what that actually means from his point of view,
I don't really know what that means, but I just get told it's backwards thinking. I think he just prefers to run home rather than, so yeah, it's fascinating. That's just, I love, because obviously, yeah, he's come to me with lots of problems because he's been in the racing world, he's a severe crib biter, he's got lots of issues, bless him. But anything that I can do to try and help them and let him be less stressed, I'm always fascinated.
Do you want me to give you hope with your crib biter?
Yeah, he's now onto his second stable door.
Well, I can't necessarily help you with the actual crib biting, but I'm going to give you promise for this, okay? So right. Statistically, 5-star horses, 26% of all 5-star horses are crib biters. Do you know why? Because of their brain makeup. So there are some actually, this is really boring now, sorry guys. so the actual genome, I won't delve into this too much. The actual genome of crib biters are slightly different. There's a defect in their genome, so actually in their brain. So they have two, oh God, now I'm trying to remember my own science. Anyway, they have two of a certain type in the middle of their genome, and it can make them more predisposed to be crib biters. So they do repetitive type behaviors. However, you can tap into this with your repetitive type behaviors. Crib biters, once they've learned a behavior, it's very difficult to untrain, but equally, that is amazing. So once you've got him to the point where he learns that all waters are fine, he won't ever then have a problem again because he does repetitive behaviors. And they found that way more in crib biters than you ever have in weavers and in box walkers. There isn't the same correlation, but they have this special defect in their genome, which is why you find more a 5-star, because they do those repetitive type behaviors like you would need to see. They need to be quick thinking, which is you can, because we've learned, okay, there's my corner and I always jump it, and then there's a back, like, because they're quick thinking, they've made that association, they keep it, so actually you might have 5-star horse in your hands. But statistically you have more crib biters, and actually if you genome most horses at 5-star have a lot of the I think it's, this is where it's 76% of those had this defect in their genome, which made them, but actually they had been managed in a way where they were never put in a scenario where they learned to crib bite. So as in, they weren't put in that stressful scenario where they actually did those repetitive behaviors like crib biting. So yes, so that is actually quite a useful thing for your horse being a crib bite. Not necessarily it's good for him, but as in like from a training point of view.
From a mentality point of view. So
once they've learned that behavior, you can't, it's really hard to make it less likely, but once they've learned how to do something, you'll find that you'll be able to go back and do things years later and they'll still have that knowledge because it's the difference in their genome.
So he's got to get it trained into his head then.
Right, and then you'll be fine.
And then when I get to Badders, I'll buy you a drink.
I'm going to be support crew.
I won't be riding.
Yeah, so that's an interesting thing about crib biters.
Fascinating, yeah. They just he doesn't affect his health, and we have him checked out and everything else. He just destroys stuff. It's just
slightly annoying. And it's not great that he learnt to crib bite. It would have been better if he was managed when he was younger, so he still would have had that genome which made him highly trainable and highly less likely to forget things because it's in his genetic makeup. However, sadly he was managed in a way which he did create those type of behaviors. So I wouldn't necessarily, now guys, I know often they don't sound very well, I wouldn't necessarily be put off by a crib biter because actually very, once you train something, they maintain that information, but it'd be better if we could manage them in a way that they didn't first.
Yeah, that's why
I think they're now starting to genome quite a lot of horses when they're first born to see if they've got this this pattern in their makeup that actually would make them more likely, and then hopefully we'll try to train them, well, keep them in a way that they don't create it.
Well,
I don't know if I told you at the top, but I'm a bit of a geek.
I love this.
I learn a lot.
I mean, Mo is related to Reg. They've got the same mother, so I'm thinking if that's.
But maybe he's been, maybe like I said, maybe he's been now kept in a way where he hasn't had that level of stress to create that type of behaviour. And just in case anyone is still of the school of thought, horses can't learn to crib bite from watching. They can't learn from mimicking behaviours. So that's anything, but you're using crib bite, because I know often livery yards don't like crib biters on them because they think that other horses would learn. They can't learn from mimicking. They also can't learn, you know, if they watch a horse do a course of jumps, they also wouldn't understand, they wouldn't replicate that either.
That's good to know, because Reg has we have what we call it the Berlin Wall of the paddock next door, that have built a kind of like electric fence because they think he will teach their youngster to crib bite.
There is no research. They can, like I said, they can be more genetically predisposed if they put in stressful situations to be a crib biter. However, they can't learn to mimic behaviours.
In the last year, he's not mimicked it. He's
exactly. Yeah, using that as a great example. But yeah.
Yeah, to be honest, Mo looks at me to say like, what are you doing, mate? Why are you?
But he's getting a lovely dopamine hit. He gets a lovely dopamine hit doing it. He's basically a bit of a druggie, but you know, if he's manageable.
Right, guys, I'm sorry I've waffled on and probably took a lot of time up, and I'm just conscious it's 8 o'clock. Has anybody got any questions that they want to ask Grace?
Sorry, guys, that was probably boring.
I've stole the limelight a lot by kind of going, oh, I've got that problem. What can you? I'm always open to trying to find out ways, just to make the life easier. And Reg is interesting because he has come with all these weird issues. Well, just issues from racing life. I think that's what it is. It's the environment they come from, I believe, that makes them more predisposed to that kind of behaviour, isn't it?
Well, sadly, it's the lack of being able to express natural behaviour. So it's like the behaviour to be able to freely graze, or behaviour to groom when they want to. So all these things that they innately want to do, we, in those scenarios, and sometimes in other livery yards and stuff, where they're not allowed to do those behaviours, is when they can develop those type of things, because they want to do them and actually they're kept in a way where they can't express them. So that's when they can do coping mechanisms like crib biting, weaving, box walking.
Yeah, we've got some questions coming in. He wasn't turned out. I think that's where
that's often what happens with racehorses, sadly.
Yeah, too vital. Right, first one from Daisy. I have a young green horse who is struggling to canter. Any tips?
Yeah, so I'm going to say once again, how good is your go? Because often if it's not quite good enough from your leg response, they haven't necessarily understood that always means up a gate. So does it know that the off means, so when you put pressure on, and does it always speed up? Because often they don't. Marlene definitely didn't when I got her. She just sort of did a bit of something and she didn't. Sometimes it was right, sometimes it wasn't. So we've done quite a long time. So I would definitely say, does it always happen? So can you do your quicker up a gate? Like, can you do faster and slower in a gate? Does your horse definitely know that leg always means go and it doesn't ever mean something else? So that, and then so that would be my main thing. Obviously sometimes horses, I don't know where you're trying to train it, sometimes the arena isn't always the best thing. I know sometimes from a safety point of view you want to do it in an arena because it's soft and, you know, enclosed, but sometimes it's too difficult for them to understand the whole going around in a circle, and trying to balance them and with you on board when they're youngsters, you know, it's a big ask. So sometimes straight lines are easier because you know, it takes away the element of balance going around the circle. So sometimes hacking out might be easier for your young horse. Still use your cues, so i.e. so then eventually we can then take it back in the arena and it does understand your counter cue. But often it's just because it's a lack of balance and they haven't always learned that the leg always means that.
Again, with my oh, 1 second, Daisy has come back on. We usually try out hacking on a straight, but she is very nappy.
Oh, so once again, I'm going to say it's definitely a bit like I said, Shirley, let's get your leg response better. So can you go halt to trot? And do they maintain it, or do they immediately slow down? So I would say get that all better, and then eventually when they really understand that leg always means upper gate or always means quicker, you will find that your canter response is much better, I would say.
Brill. Thank you. So we got Amy. Hi, Amy. She said thank you, Grace.
Very welcome, and feel free to message me if that doesn't make any sense at a different point.
Okay, so Amy's, if a horse gets stressed when it sees the wagon, is there a way to help this? She loves traveling and being at shows, so it is confusing. Yeah,
so often, so I can tell you that my horses aren't brilliant, because, you know, we only ever bring it out when we're going to take them somewhere. Generally, I do some general loading. So it is association. So even though they might have a lovely time when they're out, it often can be, I still don't want to necessarily leave my friends here. So can we create even better associations? So sometimes it can be, can we load and then not go anywhere? Because often they're just anticipating, I've got to leave my friends, and actually this is quite scary. Although she might have a nice time when she's there, remember, she can't plan that far in advance. So she's not thinking, oh, when I get there, I'll have a lovely time going dressage, show jumping, whatever you're doing when you go out. She hasn't got that level of planning to say, oh, it'll be nice when I get there. So if we can change anything, so is there anything she finds motivating enough to find it relaxing? So can we try with scratches? I'm gone as this huge amount. So when you get your wagon out, so with scratches, so if you scratch your horse at the base of the wither, really good, because bearing in mind when they groom each other, guys, it's like proper with teeth, so not just a little stroke, like an actual proper get in there. You can lower their heart rate up to 10 beats per minute, so you're then starting to create more relaxation when they're starting to sorry, I'm getting distracted by reading at the same time. So when they see the wagon, we're starting to go, okay, but at this point we're still relaxed, we're still okay. I've just seen that it's motivated by food. So what is also good is if you can keep them eating, but like forage, because chewing is really good for relaxation. It actually slows their heart rate, because they actually, if you think about a flighting horse, they can't eat when they're going into flight mode, because they're too busy hardwired. So the more you can keep them eating, so that's so not your hard feed, that's more your forage. That could be your hay, it could be a hay block, it could be whatever you want, and you're keeping them in that relaxed zone, you'll actually start to find that she stays more relaxed when you get the wagon out. So anything you can do that keeps her in that eating, chewing, it could even get a lick out. So basically they just need to keep that down. Lowering her head, so if she can get to even the floor, so there's a clostric artery in the neck, and if they lower that actually slows the heart rate down as well, because once again it's linked. Horses only graze when they're relaxed, they don't graze when they're stressed. So anything we can do to try and lower their head, keep them in that eating, you'll actually find that they relax more.
Thank you very much. There's one comment, I'm sorry your name hasn't come across, but I have a horse at my work that crib bites in the stable, but only after he's had a treat or his feed. Never does it any time of the day. Any tips or reasoning why he does this?
So there is a heavily linked between enjoyment of feed, because you're nodding, enjoyment of feed and crib biting. Because basically feed creates dopamine and crib biting creates dopamine, and your crib biter is your horse that wants to get a dopamine hit. It's a hormone that they are slightly addicted to. So once they've learned that repetitive type behaviors, then they will try that more. So it's heavily linked. So I would say, as long as it's not creating anything terrible, I would let them do the behavior, because I wouldn't ever recommend a crib collar or anything like that, because that stops them doing it. It doesn't actually change the way they feel, it just stops them from doing the behaviour, but you've still got the craving. Like, it's the same if you want a glass of wine, like the craving's still there if you can have it or not. Do you know what I mean? So I would say, unless it's causing a real problem with actually colic and that type of thing, and there isn't a huge link in that, when they've actually researched colic and cribitis, then I would sort of let them do that behaviour. And it is just that they're getting their dopamine hit because they're already having a slight release of dopamine because of the food. Food does create a dopamine hit, and they want to get a bit more of a high from the cribbing.
Fascinating. That cribbing fascinates me. Yeah, I was told by the vet the exact same thing, just let him crib, as long as he's not
as long as it's not endangering him or anyone, I would sort of let them do it, because like I said, as long as it's not harming, it's just that they're having a little high.
He's a mine's a proper addict.
Proper addict.
Proper addict. Right, we've gone way over our time.
Sorry, guys.
And I'm sorry, Grace, for taking you longer, but just so fascinating. I could talk absolute ages on vices and lots of different things. So no, thank you very much for your time.
You're very welcome.
Just bear with us 1 second. Yeah, she's just saying, no, it's fine, doesn't affect him, not sure why my name has gone. Hi, Georgia. So you put up his iPhone.
We've all got them.
Yeah. So no, guys, thank you very much for joining. Grace, what can I say? I'm going to go and rethink all my training with Reginald now, and I will let you know.
Sometimes that does happen. And if anyone's got any questions that I've not time to ask, or you think about it going forward, feel free to message me on Instagram. I reply to everything.
You're fantastic. Yeah, so I will big Grace up and say I've kind of messaged before, but this horse won't load, can we do something else different? And always comes back with some valuable advice. So you are an absolute key person to know, Grace. So yeah, thank you so much. Thanks everybody for joining, and we'll love you and leave you.
Thanks, guys.